we've been doing this for we're in our 4th year now, and it's challenging. You've got to be willing to put in the physical effort. You have to be smart enough to run it all. You have to be charismatic enough to sell it, and you have to be profitable. And all of that, or you could go sit behind a desk and just make some money. So, it's a challenge. I think it will grow to some degree, but I think there's too many small farms like this that don't get the support they need to really have it become an ongoing thing. I had the thought for a couple of years that I probably was going to be done with the career that I had worked into. I had become very successful at it, and I just didn't love it. It was okay, but I wanted something that would make me happier, and I just knew that working with my hands always made me happy. Being outside always made me happy, and I realized that if you manage it well, farming can be an okay venture. At least you won't starve. I think I came up with the idea to set up a farm, but we kind of had similar ideas where we wanted to learn how to grow food for ourselves. One of the things I try to focus on is making sure the soil is alive and healthy. And we do that by trying not to kill those organisms in the soil. And it's that life that plays a symbiotic relationship with the vegetables. And so if there's more bacterial life and bug life in the soil, then your plants generally just do a lot better. They have more nutrients, they have more access to nutrients, the soil tends to be more aerated, so they have more room to grow more rapidly. It just kind of all works out really well together. And there's a saying out there from some farmers that says, look, if the bugs don't want the food, I don't want the food. So if you see some bugs eating, some bug marks in the food, well, that means it's good food. So, if you don't see that, if you see perfectly pristine crops, maybe there's a problem. Bugs didn't want it, so maybe there's a problem there.
So how do I feel as Isaac's father, seeing him take charge out here and run the place? And I must admit, at first it was a little disorienting for me because I'd always been the one in charge, at least in our family. I was very impressed. I didn't know he could do the things he could do. Like, he built this right here. I didn't know he could do that, and he does it without plans. And the different equipment he's made. I mean, he gets an idea. He goes, "Okay, I'm getting tired of bending over and weeding all day. How can I make that easier?" And he built this 3-wheeled vehicle that you sit on and push yourself backwards, and you're sitting right over the bed, and as you push yourself backwards, you're weeding, and it's just something right up his alley naturally. So he became the kind of in charge, the foreman, the manager of the farm, but he also does a lot of the hard work too. So no, this is for him. He's really, really good at it. He is the heart and soul of the farm, and he's the one who makes it all happen. So when Isaac got really sick with COVID, that was hard for me.
I knew I was getting sick, but I didn't think it was COVID. I kind of had like this tiny little cough, like a scratchy throat almost. And after that, it was just downhill. I got, at some point, it had moved into my lungs. It turned into pneumonia. And then on, I think that Tuesday, Stephanie just took me to the hospital, and they checked me in. I was on oxygen in a regular hospital room that night. But the nurse kept coming in, and he just kept increasing my oxygen because my oximeter was showing my oxygen levels were too low in my blood. And then once he got me up to 17 liters a minute, he said, well, we've got to move you to the ICU because they've got machines that can go up to like 70 liters a minute.
I mean, they put him in a room where it was sealed off. I think the pressure was lower. People, the doctors going in had to wear these hazmat suits. I mean, he was really sick.
And by midnight, they had me up to, I think, 40 or 45 liters a minute. And I'm just sore. I can barely move. Everything hurts. I'm exhausted. By the next day, by noon of the next day, they had me up to 65 liters. And it was just getting worse and worse. So,
and I went and tried to visit him. They just let me look through the window. My wife and I looked through the window at him, and oh boy, he looked like he was about to die. You know, he couldn't talk. He was actually lying on his stomach. He had to lie on his stomach about 18 hours a day. He had a mask on to help him breathe, 65 liters of oxygen per minute. So think of how big a liter is. 65 of those per minute going into him. And it was just barely sustaining him.
they were concerned because I was young. They didn't think this shouldn't have been happening. It shouldn't be hitting me as hard as it was.
His face was getting kind of bloody from the mask. He was pressing down on it. But if he didn't lie on his stomach, his lungs would stop working. He couldn't inhale.
I would lay there, just be sore and exhausted. And I couldn't take really deep breaths because if you breathe in really deeply, the pneumonia it's basically scarring your lung tissue. And so if you breathe deeply, you're basically breaking all that scar tissue apart. And it feels like you're breathing in glass shards. And there was one time in particular where I was coughing, and the nurse is telling me, you got to breathe deeper, you got to get air in. I was finally able to calm everything down. And when I was able to relax, I could tell I was pretty close to dying. Like, it's pretty interesting when you can tell, like, my body's weak enough to just die.
That was sad. I mean, that was very sorrowful to see that happening.
Sunday morning, they came in and they said, look, we're probably going to have to intubate you because you're just not getting the oxygen you need. I was up to 65 liters a minute and having problems. And they said, but we're going to do one more x-ray. They looked at the x-ray and they said, you know what? We actually see a little bit of improvement here. We're not going to intubate you. We're going to see what happens. And then within a few days, I was down to 4 liters, and they were checking me out. We had several different days where we had family, we had friends, neighbors, people that don't even know us.
Competitors.
Competitors.
Other farms.
Yeah, we actually kind of made a good friend with somebody he's almost in Ogden, and he came down with one of his employees, paid his employee to come down, brought their tractors, and they just did the farm for a day on a very heavy work day. It's the day that we're turning beds over, we're getting the old crops out, getting ready to put new crops in, a lot of compost, just heavy lifting, lots of work. And he and his employees just came down and did it all, and didn't charge anything. We tried to pay them, they said no. And this is all, I was in the hospital. I was in the hospital when he did this. Just amazing.
I mean, there were tears shed, tears in prayer and tears of gratitude.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there were other days. There's one day we had 50 people out here pulling weeds. Walking all over the stuff, but we didn't care because they were pulling weeds.
When you've got that much light, you've got 18 hours of light, the weeds just explode.
Yep.
And the whole neighborhood showed up, and people from outside the area, and friends of friends, people we didn't even know, showed up. And customers who bought from us, they asked if they could come help. Yeah, there was different days. And then also here in the neighborhood, there were 4 teenage boys who used to just come by and just pitch in, just start working. It was very humbling. It was very humbling. It told me that Isaac had a lot of friends.
So the best way to support this type of farming is to go to your local farmers markets. That's where most of these farms are going to be, is at the local farmers market. From there, you can talk to the growers and you'll start to see, oh, there's like a little community there. Some people sell online. Like we, for the last several years, have sold online. So you don't have to go to the farmers market. You can find their websites at that point, order directly from them, and then they'll usually have a drop-off point, or you can order ahead of time, go pick it up at the farmer's market, so you don't have to walk the whole farmer's market. It just makes it much more convenient. What I would like people to know is that without this kind of farming, you're putting a couple of things at risk. One is food security. And so if you're depending on a system to transport food hundreds of miles, or in some cases thousands of miles, to provide you with the food you need, if anything happens to that system, you go without food, period. Well, the way you build security against that is you bring the farms closer. Well, to bring farms closer, you got to pay a little more. We say that it costs more, that this type of food costs more, but when you consider all the damage that's done to the earth with our existing type of big agricultural farming, there is a tax being paid, and that's in healthcare costs. So yes, you're paying less for food, but you're paying more in healthcare, doctor's visits, insurance, all those things, extra vitamins you have to buy to supplement the kind of low quality food that we're eating. Well, if you take all that extra cost for all those other things and disperse it amongst the groceries that you buy, it's probably a little less expensive just buying the local food, well-grown food. And you're not having to deal with pollution, so those healthcare costs go down. You're not having to deal with extra oil, so those costs come down. It's just all, it feels like you're paying more, but in the long run, we're probably going to be paying quite a bit less because we're doing things that are sustainable rather than destroying the land and air around us. We're improving it, which then makes everything else cheaper. So that's one other aspect I'd love to have people know.